Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Meeting Space podcast. I am sitting today with not only beautiful, but smart and creative Samantha Vogel. Hello, Samantha.
Hi, Magdalena.
Samantha is a senior manager of meetings for GameStop. She is a strategic thinker. She is a creative curator of experiential events and meetings for GameStop. And I am so super excited to have you here this morning on a finally beautiful, sunny and dry morning. No snow on the ground because last week we have the big snow apocalypse of 2021 in Texas. So welcome. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. And yes, I'm also very excited that it's going to be about 70 degrees in San Antonio today. Much better than 9 degrees.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I think we will be talking about that last week for quite a while here because it was so unusual. So thank you for joining me today and the willingness to share your knowledge with the listeners. Last 2 weeks, I had a chance to publish the episode with Judy Payne, and you and Judy work together. So I am super excited to continue the conversation how GameStop put on this huge conference in 2020 in the virtual space. Because it is such a big event when it comes to in-person. You guys put so much experience into the conference when it comes to being there in person, and then transforming that into virtual space is just, for me, I just cannot even fathom how much work went into that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge. Our in-person show with all of our GameStop attendees and vendors is over, 6,000 people, and it's incredibly experiential. There are hands-on games that haven't been released to the public. And this was a big year for us, 2020, because the new consoles launched, which if anybody knows anything about gaming, which I totally understand if you don't, because I didn't before I worked at GameStop, console launches are the biggest exciting point of any video game cycle, and it's a huge investment for GameStop and for all of the video game companies when new consoles drop. So this year, had we been in person, all of our store managers would have had the opportunity to see those consoles before they're ever on sale to the public, to actually play on them, to learn all the ins and outs of the design. So trying to find a way to bring all that in-person experience into a virtual setting is incredibly complicated when you can't touch the new products, when you can't, feel the apparel that we're going to be selling in stores, and, get your hands on the new console and actually play a video game on the brand new console you're about to be selling. So having to think outside the box and how we create a virtual meeting that transcends that experiential, space and atmosphere of our conference. It was a challenge, but it was also really fun to think outside the box and find new ways to connect our exhibitors with our attendees, and keep our attendees engaged throughout, what for us was actually a much longer conference cycle than what we would have done in person. So a challenge, yes, but a lot of learning opportunities and a lot of new ways to engage with our attendees and our exhibitors.
Wow. Well, from talking to Judy, I know that it lasted 13 weeks.
Forever.
Wow. That is a long time. So let's backtrack a little bit. I would love to hear about you first and your background. How did you become a meeting planner? And then maybe quickly you can walk us through your road to this position with GameStop.
Sure. Yeah. So I graduated college in 2006, and I honestly really had no idea what I wanted to do. And I took care of my grandma's for a while I was figuring it out. My mom came home and said, you know what, you're going to be a teacher. So I went and taught high school English for 1 year and realized that that was just not for me. And then I, sat down and really thought about what I love to do and what my strengths were. And I love to design. I love to design experiences, events. I love to design opportunities for people to come together and, create wonderful things in our communities and things like that. So I applied for a job at the San Antonio Convention Center. And I actually worked on the industry side when I first started working there. I worked for a company called the Arcade Group in-house. And then after doing that for a while, I decided to move into large scale nonprofit events. So I worked for companies like the March of Dimes, where I managed March for Babies, which is like 30,000 people. And that was very heavily fundraising. So a lot of opportunity there, stretching my legs and figuring out how companies want to get their employees involved. So volunteer management, but also raising a lot of money for a great cause. But with raising money comes that, focus on sponsorships and how do you provide a return on investment to your sponsors. And then, I was there for a while and had this opportunity come up at GameStop, and I was excited because I was like, oh my gosh, not only do I get to, raise money with sponsorships, which I do at GameStop as well, but I also get to spend money, which in nonprofit you don't get to do. And the video game industry, while I am not a gamer myself, it was very exciting because it is such a creative community. It's always at the forefront of technology, of innovation, and it's a community that's incredibly passionate. They're passionate about not only their video games, but each other. And so it's really been probably the most exciting job I've ever had. I've had some wonderful jobs, and honestly, I'm very blessed that I've had great bosses and incredible experiences that have helped me grow. But this job is so fun because I love to think outside the box and do new, innovative things. And this is the perfect environment to do it because gamers are up for anything. They love trying new things. Some of our exhibitors are like Microsoft and Sony and Activision and Nintendo. So companies that themselves love to think outside the box and stretch their wings. And so it's been a really exciting 6.5 years that I've been with GameStop. It's flown by. But it's been a really exciting journey.
Wow. Sounds like you have met your match so far, at least. That's great to hear. So thank you for walking me and the listeners a little bit through your past and how did you start in the meetings and events. With GameStop annual conference being so heavily involved in, vendor management. I'm talking about in person right now, vendor management, sponsorships. There is, Judy touched on the conference as a whole, but with you, what I would like to focus on is the expo part, because that's my understanding is where you got to really do something different this year because of moving the whole conference into virtual space. So let's start with, how did you even start the process with being responsible for over $8 million in sponsorship revenue for GameStop annual conference? That is a huge number. How did that reflect in 2020? Just let's start chatting about that. And how did you start the process of moving that big part of the annual conference into virtual space?
Yeah, sure. So Magdalena, the first thing we had to start with is, what did that experience look like? Before you can ever go ask vendors or exhibitors for money, you have to have a complete understanding of what their experience is going to be at your event, right? So we knew that what we typically are able to offer in terms of return on experience and return on investment would look completely different in 2020 obviously being that we wouldn't be able to be in person. And so before we really looked at, well, what are we going to raise here and how are we going to get these sponsorships and what do the sponsorships packages look like for 2020 in a virtual setting, to be able to tell our exhibitors what the 2020 virtual experience would even be like. So it really started off with trying to understand how to move an expo, especially a highly experiential one, into a virtual atmosphere. And I'm going to say this, and it's not going to be anything your listeners have heard for the first time or experience themselves, but it's impossible to create the same experience online. It just is. It doesn't matter if your show is really highly experiential like ours or more networking based, but you just can't translate the in-person experience online. You can get close, you can be creative, you can provide opportunities. But at the end of the day, you have to go in, I think, with an understanding of knowing that you're going to do the best you can, but that you're just not going to be able to provide the same type of interaction. There's just a special magic that comes with being in person that you don't get online. But with that said, we wanted to find a platform that was as experiential as we could find to create the most opportunity for interaction and engagement between our exhibitors and our attendees. And I will tell you that that was a very difficult feat. A lot of the virtual platforms out there for expos, they're really more for like HR fairs, they're more for job fairs. They felt very corporate, very flat, not a lot of opportunity for interaction, definitely not a lot of opportunity for gamification. Because we're gamers, because of our exhibitors are in the gaming and toy industries, we love to have contests about everything. And they have the opportunity at our in-person event to win thousands and thousands of dollars in prizing. And so how do you find a platform that brings that sort of gamified experience into the virtual space? So we probably researched over 100 platforms. It took months, to be honest. We probably demoed and talked to over 40 in person, virtually, obviously, but we ended up narrowing it down to about 2. And the truth is, the challenge with 2020, not only was it moving your show to this virtual space, but it was a timeline. We all know crafting huge events and these incredible experiences, they take us years. We're booking 5 years out, we're planning, at least 12 months out at a minimum, right? Oftentimes longer. And moving into this virtual setting, it took us so long to even pull the trigger, not knowing what the landscape was going to look like, that by the time we did and got our internal stakeholders on board, our executives, we had a very short runway to figure out what we were going to do, find the platform we were going to do it on, and implement it. So that created a challenge in and of itself, because we did find some platforms we were in love with, that we thought provided incredible, experiential opportunity, but we didn't have the timeline to build those out, to do it the right way. The other thing is, a lot of the really good platforms, because everybody was going virtual, it was hard to get in with them, right? Everyone wanted to use the platforms that provided the most, interactive experience. And so because of that, some of the platforms are like, we would love to work with you, but we might not be able to fit you in. But really lucky, we found a platform called Six Connects. It is not perfect. No virtual platform is, just to be clear, but it offered a lot of the things we were looking for. We knew that gamification was a must-have. So it offered us a gamification component. We had the ability to customize each exhibitor's booth, which is really important to us when you have exhibitors that are highly competitive in a gamified space, especially in a year where they're launching new consoles. There was an interactive piece, so our attendees could engage in real time with the exhibitors, which is one of the most important things of bringing people together, right? Giving them that real time, in-person, one-on-one opportunity to engage and discuss. So it ended up being, a platform that worked very well for us this year. I will say that if we continue to be virtual for 21, which looks like a very likely possibility with vaccine rollouts just taking a little bit longer than anticipated, we will probably look for a platform that maybe offers an additional component in the virtual setting, something with customized avatars. Our people are gamers, so they're used to having their own video game character exploring a virtual space. That's what they do every single day. So I think we'll look for a platform that gives them that opportunity to have their own avatar, customize it, and see their avatar exploring a virtual space in 3D. But for this year, Six Connects was a wonderful platform for us. Our exhibitors were very happy with it. I will tell you, Magdalena, the other challenge that came once we picked the platform was explaining to exhibitors what a virtual expo looked like, what they could do with their booth, how they customized their booth, what kind of activities they could do in their booth, how they were going to really interact and engage, because our exhibitors had not participated in virtual expos ever before. Not our big ones from Sony and Nintendo, all the way to our little toy vendors. It just isn't something they're accustomed to doing. And that was a challenge, really having to spend a lot of time showing our exhibitors how they can create the best possible booth experience for attendees in a virtual space. I will tell you that I probably did more custom design work for our vendors this year than I've ever done before. But from a monetary standpoint, when you're talking about the dollars, I will say that our vendors, while we raise, over $8 million in a normal year for our sponsorships, which is, in and of itself a challenge, but also exciting. Our vendors spend millions of dollars on the back end of the live event, right? They're spending millions of dollars building these incredible sets. I mean, one year, Microsoft actually built an arena on our show floor so that they could actually show the attendees not only what the new Halo looked like, but they could play in the game, in the arena themselves, like in virtual augmented reality. So they spend millions of dollars to bring the most incredible experiences to life for our attendees. And in a virtual setting, they did not have to bring that capital to the table. So we knew that going in, but we also knew that the return on investment for the experience of the exhibitor was not going to match the return on investment that they're going to get in person, right? The magic of our show is these vendors literally get to see our store managers face to face, one-on-one. They talk to every single one. And the importance of that is, right, these are the people going out and selling their products. These are the people making the magic happen for the holiday season, not only for exhibitors, but for customers too. And while in the virtual setting, all of those attendees are still required to attend, it's just not the same. So we knew that our sponsorship packages had to reflect that difference. So we targeted about $2.5 million this year in sponsorships. I'll tell you that we did meet our goal. And it's interesting because we met that goal without capturing about 50% of our exhibitors on the show floor. While a lot of our exhibitors, and especially our video game exhibitors, understood the value of, we know it's not in person, but we still need to talk to your attendees. We still want that interaction, however virtual it may be. For our little exhibitors, our mom and pop toy companies, especially where, they want to touch and feel and play with the toys, it was very difficult for them to understand how a virtual expo could really create that experience. And so we did lose about 50% of our exhibitors in the virtual space. So that was hard. And I will say the toy companies that we did capture, don't think that they had the same experience as the video game companies we were able to capture. It's just really difficult to, have a kind of a flat virtual landscape when you're showcasing toys that have all these intricate parts you can play with, and collector's items where you want to see the detail. So if we're going to be 20 virtual and 21, we're really going to be brainstorming out of the box ways to create a better return on investment for our toy and apparel exhibitors. Maybe it's a 3D try on. We're still kicking around a lot of ways to bring that, return on investment to life for them. But I will say that the virtual expo did provide some limitations for our toy companies.
Wow. Gosh, it sounds like a lot. So what is the number of what is the number of exhibitors that you usually have in person event?
We usually have depending on the year, because gaming is very cyclical. We have anywhere between 110 and 150 on our big years, and our show, to be clear, I want to make sure everyone knows this too. Our expo is invite only. So we don't solicit people coming to our show. It is absolutely only companies that we do business with and that we will be doing business with during the holiday season, our timeline. So we're pretty particular about who we will allow on our show floor. But we usually have anywhere from, 110 to 150. This year in the virtual setting, we had about 70.
Okay.
Definitely a decrease in, the number of exhibitors that we would showcase. And again, a lot of the fall off is either gaming companies that didn't have a new game launching anytime soon, or our toy companies that just couldn't understand how they could really showcase their toys and collectors items in a virtual space.
Let's talk about that ROI, and before we do that, I'm just going to do something different here with the screen, because I just realized that I have it set differently for recording purposes. But let's talk about ROI, Samantha. Tell me a little bit, how did you? Everybody, let me do this. Everybody is struggling, and there's a lot of conversations happening currently on how to show ROI to the sponsors because of the virtual space. Me and some of my friends in the business, we have been, chatting, and it is just so hard. And part of it is, I think, it is the platform that you choose, but what else is there to, create that engagement between the vendor, the exhibitor rather, and the attendee? How did you start that process, and where did it take you?
Yeah, I think the ROI conversation is really interesting, because from a data perspective, you actually have more data we can provide for ROI purposes in a virtual setting than we do in a person setting. And I think this is really where especially event planners know what it means to say, like, the magic of an in-person event. At an in-person event, we don't do lead retrieval at our show, because you don't need to know who's coming to your booth, because they're all GameStop store managers. You're not soliciting them one-on-one. So our exhibitors at our in-person show, they don't leave the show saying, 3,204 of the 5,000 GameStop store managers came to our booth. They really have no idea. They're just experiencing and they're seeing it in person. They're talking to these people in person live. So when they leave the show floor, they're really excited about the level of conversations they have and what they might perceive was a lot, even though they really don't have a specific number of people that they talk to. In the virtual setting, we were literally able to tell them 3,421 of our 5,000 people visited your booth. This is when they visited it. This is if they talked to you or not. Oh, Samantha Vogel actually visited it from store, 1210. She clicked on everything in your booth. So we were actually able to provide a much more detailed, quantitative level of reporting to our vendors than we ever can in an in-person event. But I think what you're really seeing when people say, you know, the magic of an in-person event is the attendees, the exhibitors, they didn't experience the same excitement because they weren't seeing these people face to face. They're seeing them behind a computer screen. And I will say they were really excited about the data that they got. They were like, wow, this is really great. And in a virtual setting, a lot of them had trouble explaining to their management teams, like, why are we going to go in a virtual setting? Can you accomplish the same things that you were going to accomplish in person? And they liked this data because they were able to go show their executives, well, look, you know, here's the breakdown. Here's all the people we were able to talk to. But as far as, you know, creating the same level of engagement when you're talking about return on investment, I think for us from a sponsorship setting, the biggest thing we did was created a social platform outside of the expo where we allowed exhibitors and attendees to engage through sponsored posts. So we did a lot of things. So like I said at our show, there's lots of giveaways, there's lots of free t-shirts, there's a lot of fun stuff that they get to get their hands on that in a virtual expo, you don't get that. But we still provided the opportunity for our vendors to send them that stuff in advance of the expo. So what we got on the social platforms outside of the expo platform was all of our attendees wearing, you know, the Star Wars t-shirt. And they're not only because they're gamers and they're so passionate and so creative, not only are they wearing the Star Wars t-shirt, they're wearing it with a Darth Vader, you know, head mask thing from one of our collectibles companies. So they're mixing the video game piece with EA with the collectibles company piece. And then they're posting that all over social media. Well, we captured all of that. I mean, we screenshotted every picture, every fun engagement piece that we found online in a social platform like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. And we correlated all of those and created amazing virtual documents for our vendors that they were never expecting. And they loved that because it bridged that gap between we can't see what they're doing, we can't see their excitement, to, okay, here's all these pictures of their engagement and excitement with your products, with your brands, with your IPs. And I think from a virtual standpoint, that was probably the biggest piece of return on investment that they appreciated. They loved seeing the numbers, they loved seeing the statistics, but what they wanted to see was the excitement, the passion, the engagement for their products. So capturing that on the social platforms outside of the expo, I think was, you know, the biggest success that we had.
Did you create, I think Judy mentioned the Facebook group that was private just for the attendees of the show. Did you create any special hashtags for Instagram to then track everything? How did that, did you?
Yeah, we always have a conference hashtag, and we really, like, anytime we have any type of communication, we're like pushing the conference hashtag, and we've done that for years. So they're very well aware of, you know, make sure they use it, because what we'll also do is we'll grab their posts if they use a hashtag and we'll put them back out there to them, right? So the attendees know, like, if I create this fun video, there's a chance they could send it out to everybody or whatever. And they really love that. So we create the conference hashtag, and then we use, you know, a correlation platform. So we use Tagboard, and Tagboard will look for our hashtag on any social platform, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you know, Discord, anywhere at all. And it'll pull the entire post into our Tagboard post. So I can easily go into Tagboard and see anything our attendees have said on any platform, whether it's our Facebook page for our actual conference, which is private, or if they posted it on their personal Twitter page, you know, that had nothing to do with GameStop, but they used our hashtag. So that was really, I mean, it's really, we do that every year, honestly. But this year, because it was a virtual conference and because it was spanned out so long, like you said at the beginning, 13 weeks, we had so many social posts. And we also had so many things that we did that created that, you know, kind of virtual excitement that we don't do at an in-person event. So we sent out, you know, part of the sponsorship was, you know, some of our vendors could sponsor morning coffee if they were hosting a general session that day. So On Xbox Day, you know, Microsoft hosted Starbucks coffee. So we're not only getting pictures of them in their Xbox t-shirts that Xbox sent them, but we're also getting pictures of them with their Xbox t-shirt, you know, with their favorite Starbucks drink. So it's really fun. And, you know, our vendors are able to see that, okay, we paid X amount of dollars for this Starbucks sponsorship. Did that really matter? And then they're seeing all these posts of them where their Starbucks drinks like, thank you so much. After 13 weeks, I need this coffee to keep me going, you know? So I think from a return on investment standpoint, while our vendors are never going to come to the table and say they prefer virtual over in person, absolutely not going to happen. But they were like, okay, we could see the engagement happening by seeing all these pictures, not just in the expo where they're getting to chat with them, but seeing over the span of the entire event, the excitement that was created on the back ends. They really loved that. And I'll say from a return on investment standpoint, Magdalena, is one of the things that virtual offers everyone, regardless of your industry or what you're doing, is the chance to broaden your attendee base. So whatever that looks like for you. But for us in our in-person conference, we only bring 5,000 of our store managers, but we have 25,000 store associates, right, that are selling our exhibitors products, but aren't getting the one-on-one training with the exhibitors. So in a virtual setting, it's so easy to expand that. So we opened up our expo, not only to our store managers, but to all our store associates. So when we sent them that breakdown of, okay, 3,400 store managers visited your booth, we were also able to say, hey, but guess what, Nintendo, you know, 13,500 store associates under the store manager level also visited your booth. And then we can correlate that to sales. We can say, hey, look at your sales for Q4. You know, they were, you know, 82% higher than they were last year. Maybe there's a correlation between the additional training for additional store associates and your sales for this year. But there's not, but maybe there is. And, you know, we did have some exhibitors like Oculus. They launched a new virtual reality headset this. And when they did the training with us, we opened it up to all our store associates. They could see the sales coming in right after the training in real time. And they were like, wow, this is like far beyond what we expected. And we could tell them exactly how many people took the training. And then not only that, but we could say out of all the people that took the training, these are the people that sold your product, because we obviously have that data in our internal sales systems. So it was a great way to correlate that return on investment for the virtual training piece with the data we were able to compile from virtual training that we don't always have in an in-person environment.
Yes, and it seems like, you know, even though 13 weeks sounds like a madness, there is a reason to have it spend out over that kind of time to give each product the focus that it needs to have. And then and how cool to track the sales and be able to say, look, after we rolled out this training, look how your sales spiked. So there is that component also that, you know, some people think, oh my gosh, 13 weeks, but, you know, let's not forget that's 4 hours, every Wednesday, right? And that's about it. It's not 13 weeks, Monday through Friday.
No, and it's, you know, it was one of the things when we started, Magdalena, our in-person event obviously is, you know, it's 5 days. It's not 13 weeks. But when we went to virtual, you know, we were forced to go to virtual, we wanted to capitalize on all the good things that could come out of being virtual. And that was a thing because in our industry, you know, Bethesda might be launching their new game in September, but the new consoles didn't drop until November. So in the gaming world, there's a couple of months difference is huge in terms of what brands are willing to tell people about what the product is going to look like. There's a lot of last minute changes happening before a product gets launched. So being able to change that timeline this year was a big pro that we wanted to capitalize on. And I will say that it also made the expo more fun. So we did our whole conference and exhibitor and vendor training over the course of weeks. Our expo closed the show out. It was at the very end. And it was the only opportunity that our exhibitors had to actually interact in real time with our attendees. So it was interesting to see this whole 12 weeks of lead up and training and deep dives. And our associates had the opportunity to, find out what their questions were, to get questions from customers, and then kind of end it with the expo, which was gamified. They got to have fun with all the things they learned through the course of, the 12 weeks. But then they also got to cap it off with like talking in person in real time with the exhibitors that were online and hosting booths. So it was from that standpoint, the virtual expo, I think, was such a wonderful closing to our show. It created that kind of last minute opportunity to get the questions answered, to gamify all the training they've learned, throughout the 12 weeks. And our vendors really loved being able to customize their training throughout the course of the 13 weeks to the time frame that best fit them with the launch of their product. So it's definitely a plus. I think every planner out there, Magdalena, will tell you that like I said at the beginning, there is no replacing in-person events. You can't get close to the same kind of, engagement, interaction, just one-on-one connection and magic. But there are things that are positive in the virtual space. And I think for planners, it's just really taking a long look at your demographics, at your exhibitor base, and figuring out what are the positives in the virtual space that, can benefit our show. And that's really what we've tried to spend a lot of time doing. And I'm sure Judy told you, we haven't made a final decision, but it's looking like 21 might end up being virtual, just because, in order for us to bring everyone together, that many people, everyone would have to have their vaccine and their booster by May. Here we are, almost March. Like, it just doesn't seem like a likely scenario. Plus, we're really focused on the mental well-being of our attendees. Are people ready? Even if they had the vaccine, if they get the booster by May, which is unlikely, but if it happens, are people ready to be in a crowded room with 6,000 people, all at the same time? We're not sure that that's happening yet. So if we do stay virtual in 21, it'll be a great opportunity to capitalize on all the good things we saw from virtual last year, but also on all the things we learned that maybe didn't work. Like I talked about, the toy companies and the apparel companies, and finding new creative ways in a virtual space to bring, a return on investment to companies like that, and a better experience for attendees as well.
Mm-hmm. You touched on this a little bit, and I'm planning to jump a little bit into a different pool, because you and I feel we feel very passionate about that. Bringing people together. This, people not being ready for mentally and psychologically to be, oh my gosh, I'm going to be surrounded by, 4,000 people. How do you see in-person events moving forward? What do you think will change in the events when it comes to in-person meetings as a result of 2020?
I mean, it's a great question, and I wish I was psychic and knew the answer for sure. I don't. So all I can do is speak to what I think the things will look like. But I really believe that once a majority of Americans get the vaccine, the ones that choose to get the vaccine, I think people will start to feel much more comfortable again. I know my parents have already received the vaccine, and I feel much safer. They're not really even that high of risk, but I feel so much safer knowing that they've had that vaccine. And here's the thing, Magdalena, and you know this, we've talked about this before. We are social beings. We want to be with other people. We want experiences. No one's going to sit here and be like, oh, my first virtual experience was, in 8th grade when I had virtual science camp. Like, nobody remembers that, but everybody remembers their first concert, because it's that excitement of being together. It's the excitement that planners can create in in-person events, experiences that people will never forget. And you just can't do that virtually. So I think people want to go back to, life where they're with other people, where they're at live events. And I truly think that in 22, we will see that come back very strong. There's a lot of talk about what do events look like, or is there going to be social distancing in the future? Will people be wearing masks? I think that's a reality for 21 and maybe 22, but I really don't think it's a long-term reality. I think by 23, people will be together again with their vaccine, without masks, close together. I just think that's the nature of human beings. And it's, COVID, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying anything like that, but I think, one day in the future, a couple of years from now, COVID will very much be like the flu, where you get your annual booster and, you don't see people wearing masks or social distancing because they're afraid to get the flu, because this is something that we know. It's something our culture lives with day to day. We know to wash our hands, and we know if we are sick not to be around other people. And I'm hoping that that's the same reality for COVID, that by 23, our scientists, our healthcare workers will have done an incredible job. Our American population and our international, population will be vaccinated, and people will be safe and healthy again to be close to one another. But I don't know the future, and we'll just have to play it by ear and see what happens. But the one thing I do know is that as planners, we are so good as a collective community at ensuring the safety of our attendees. So whatever the future looks like, I know that the planning community can bring back in-person events that are incredible, experiential, that still bring that same amount of excitement, but making sure that our attendees are safe and mentally and emotionally, not worried about being together. I know our planner community is always focused on the well-being of our attendees. So that I'm not concerned about that at all.
Yeah. Well, the big part of being event planner is risk mitigation and risk assessment. Any good meeting planner has a risk mitigation plan before the meeting even starts. And I think that we're just gonna have to include pandemic in that and be really prepared for it with some tangibles based on 2020. So I am a big proponent of let's start meeting in person. Let's put the things that have been said at the beginning of pandemic into use. Mask up, wash your hands, stay 6 feet apart. That's what CDC and WHO have been recommending from the beginning of the pandemic. And for me, it's just, it's that mental, psychological block that people have, that being surrounded by other people. And that is natural. As much as we are social beings, we also have, a lot of fears. And I think that also plays into the live events, in-person meetings and things like that. So I am all for in-person meetings happening. Let's go.
Me too. Yeah. And it's interesting, Judy and I had this conversation. I think what the pandemic, especially when we talk about that emotional well-being and looking at how people are reacting to going back to in-person events and being concerned because they don't know, what are other people's lifestyles like. I think one of the things that's so interesting is, like, for instance, me, I'm young, I'm healthy. Like I'm not overly, I'm O blood type. So I'm not overly concerned about if I were to contract COVID, what would that mean for me? But I have a 93-year-old grandmother who I adore. She's at the end of her life. So I want to see her as much as I can and be around her. And while I'm not worried about me getting COVID, I'm definitely worried about, if I got COVID and passed it along to her. So I think from an event standpoint, the pandemic has kind of extended what we look at in terms of mental well-being of our attendees now into, well, what does their social bubble look like? Because are they not coming because they're worried about COVID? Or are they not coming because, they live with people they consider high risk and they don't want to be exposed and then pass it off? And I think it just extends what we're looking at. And, Judy and I, we oversee travel at GameStop as well. And that's one of the things we actually had to write into the travel policy. Like, we have people that might have to travel for business needs and they don't want to because they live with an at-risk in-law, or they have a child that, has some medical conditions that make them at risk as well. And, they're not worried about themselves. They're worried about their extended social network. And that's a very real thing that I think planners are going to have to think about, and how we, create opportunities for people to recognize they will be safe in these events in the next coming, years is important. But I'm definitely all for live events too. I know Miranda Lambert announced her first concert back in person at the end of April. And my cousins and I, we all bought tickets. So
yay.
Your masks, it's 50% capacity. So, they're doing their best to make sure that they're following CDC guidelines, but we're really excited to go. And my grandmother has gotten the vaccine, so I definitely also feel safer now going out and doing things, knowing that she's, getting the care that she needs to make sure she's from COVID as well.
Yeah. Do you think that GameStop will continue having a virtual aspect of their annual meeting, even if the in-person events come back?
I think so. And I think that's when we talk about return on investment. I think one thing virtual was able to do in such a great way is extend our training to associates who don't have the opportunity to come to our in-person event, even if and when it does come back. So I think, having that virtual aspect, it gives us a chance to really dive deeper and create a better investment for our exhibitors, for people that are on our sales floor selling their products. So I think we will always have that virtual component moving forward. It's something we actually have been in open conversations with our vendors about, our exhibitors. And of course, they want to go back to in person for the store managers, but they were like, yeah, if we can keep this virtual piece for the other store associates, reaching 25,000 people as opposed to 5,000, that's a huge win. So finding a way to leverage, the technology to create that experience virtually for, associates under our store manager level, I think is a huge plus and a positive that's come out of this entire pandemic for our business setting. So exciting to see how we leverage that in the future.
Very awesome. Very awesome. Well, I am looking forward to, having maybe this conversation with you a few months from now, a year from now, and see where we stand. It's always exciting to have guests come back and see how the landscape has changed or stayed the same. I will actually, last March or April, I had Michael Dominguez, and he's coming back next month to talk a little bit on current state of affairs in the events and meetings industry. So I'm very excited to hear that. So let's plan on circling back with each other in a few months so we can revisit and see how things have changed, and hopefully all of those changes will be positive and going in the right direction.
Yes, we'll do. Magdalena, thanks so much for having me and for, putting this podcast out. It's always so great to see what other planners in the community and industry are doing, not only in this virtual time, but I always love hearing and learning from other planners. So thank you so much. And I look forward to what the future holds for GameStop and for our industry as a whole.
Yes, definitely. Well, I will be sure to keep you in the loop of the guests to come back and talk about event. And, who knows, maybe we will collaborate on some other things. I'm already thinking, well, maybe I should have Samantha and Judy on a panel together, and we can chat all of us together and see how we can collectively come up with exciting topics. So who knows? I will be in touch for sure. I appreciate your time. It's been absolutely a pleasure to chat with you, Samantha. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Magdalena. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.